Okay, this is a video comparison between the Thieaudio Clairvoyance and the Shuoer EJ07. They're both tribrids. Go and check it out. It totally escaped my mind over the past 4 weeks while I've been listening to these that actually the EJ07 is 150 bucks more than the Clairvoyance. I'd forgotten how expensive these actually are. And I'm a bigger fan of the Clairvoyance than the EJ07. Not recency bias because I've had these for 2 months maybe. I'll go ahead and get into the music and explain why I think that the Clairvoyance is a better set. I like both of these sets. You don't take a set that you thought was the best tribrid for 9, 10, 11, about a year, and then suddenly say it's not good. It's just as good as it was a month ago. I think it's a little bit better, the playback on the Clairvoyance. That's it. So this is no different than it was before the Clairvoyance came along. Which one would I pick? I'd pick the Clairvoyance. I'll explain why. Let me get into that. Okay, the bass. Using Fool in the Rain, the drums, the Purdy Shuffle done by John Bonham. Marvin Gaye, the 808 Roland. Violent Femmes, a slightly slackened 4-string bass guitar. Tupac Ambitions as a Rider, a 90s West Coast hip-hop deck mix. A sample of a sample of a sample. Led Zeppelin, When the Levee Breaks, an intentionally mixed and produced pushed forward kick drum. Eurythmics, Sweet Dreams, keyboards and synthesizers, and then Led Zeppelin again with Dazed Confused with an intentionally and produced push forward 4-string bassist. Using those tracks, it seems that it's very difficult to come up with something one over the other. I could make stuff up and talk about heights and little stuff, but this is a very good set, the EJ07. It's $150 more than this set, which I just got reminded of before I started to do this video because I got on and I took a look and thought that's just checking it out, 700 bucks. That's 850 bucks. Okay, I forgot about that. I already like this one better. It's on my list up higher. But determining the difference between bass, I could try to make shit up for you guys. It's really not there. When something's good, it's good. Is one better than the other? Not really. It sometimes seems like the EJ07, here I go with pulling shit out my butt, might sound a little overbearing. That makes no sense for a bass head, but anything overemphasized in the brain, for some reason, my EJ07 does that sometimes. Whether it's in the treble or it's in the bass or it's something the mids are scooped, is going to draw your attention mentally because it's not what you're used to, and that itself becomes fatiguing after a while. EJ07 is quite a potent puncher. The Clair is more of a, I would like to say traditional, but it's actually exceptional. It's not really. The way that they did this bass, I don't know if it was intentional or accidental, because the flagship Monarch doesn't do the kick drum on When the Levee Breaks, doesn't do Dazed Confused, the 4-string bass guitar in a way that I'm used to. It doesn't do Please Do Not Go by Violent Femmes in the way that I'm used to, but it's the flagship. So it might be designed for classical music. If you listen to 70s rock and roll, if you listen to 80s and 90s rock and roll, if you listen to hip-hop, particularly 90s hip-hop, in the 2000s too, reggae, I would definitely say take the Clair over the Monarch as well as take it over the Shuoer. But saying something is better than the other in the bass department between Shuoer and the EJ07 is, or the Clairvoyance, is a little bit of a reach. And I'm not in the mood to be reaching for stuff, so they both do good in the bass. And that's the bass. Almost pointless, but that's what happens when you have two very good sets sitting side by side. You've either got to make some shit up or just admit that they're both really good and move on and find the difference at a later time. So I'm moving on. Okay, the mid-frequency. Dire Straits, Sultan of Swing, Fleetwood Mac, Go Your Own Way, The Chain, Goldust Woman, some other tracks. Doobie Brothers, Taking It to the Streets, Black Sabbath, Sweet Leaf, Meatloaf, Paradise by the Dashboard Light, Jim Croce, Operator. I've had more people complain about my pronunciation of Jim Croce's name than probably anything in this channel's history. Listening to Dire Straits, Sultan of Swing, listening to Mark and the guitar solo, the difference starts to show itself. The potency of the EJ07's bass can kind of make Mark's voice and the bassist that's pinning down this track and the guitar solo that's the lead-ins and Mark's voice, everything together sounds a little more clear and resolving on the Claire than it does on the EJ07. With the EJ07 is a fun, relax, enjoy listen for critical listening and picking stuff out like I do as a reviewer. It sounds like the Claire is doing this better, and I got to put that to less authoritative punch in the Claire. It's got good sub bass, it's got proper mid bass, but it's not as in your face as the EJ07. And times when a lead singer, a bassist in the background pinning down the track, and a guitar solo being played by the lead singer goes on at the same time, it seems like a better playback on the Claire. This is not putting stuff out there, pulling shit out of my ass. This is actually real. That's why the bass I had to pretty much skip over almost completely. Not a lot of difference. But the way the bass is tuned influences the way that the mids are perceived. And it seems like the playback of Sultans of Swing is a more enjoyable, authentic experience on the Claire than it is on the EJ07. And that's due to a slight overemphasis on the EJ07. I don't care what graphs say, I can hear it. And this set is one of the original Shuoers. So that is a clear difference. Vocals on the Chain, Goldust Woman, they both sound good, but again, the potency of the EJ07's bass kind of gives Stevie Nicks a little more low-end energy in her vocals, as opposed to the Claire, which sounds more like what I'm comfortable in, what I've experienced listening to on my mother's home system with floor speakers, on my own home system with floor speakers, on a car audio system that's balanced out tune. You can set crossovers and everything for when you want to not set off car alarms. The Claire seems to do that slightly better. The Claire is the long listen set. The EJ07 I thought was, but that bass is doing its thing and it's distracting at a point. So I would give that to the Claire. The quality of Black Sabbath Sweet Leaf between 2-minute 30-second and beyond seems to be slightly clearer on the Clairvoyance. Again, when the low frequency is elevated or its impact is perceived as being too much, everything that follows can be slightly vase, a veil, a haze, not being detected on the EJ07, but the Claire seems like a more balanced, kind of clear playback to this listener. So the mids seem to be more intact and done better than they are on the EJ07. I haven't seen EJ07 graph in quite a long time, so I don't really care what graphs say. That's a guideline. The bass is sometimes slightly getting in the way from the EJ07, and it's not actually doing that with the Claire. Meatloaf Paradise by the Dashboard Light, the same thing is happening again. The vocals, male and female, it's like a Broadway production. It's very exciting, it's very loud, but when I compare the Claire and the EJ07, the Claire sounds more natural, more authentic, where the EJ07 sounds more put into a club with the bass turned up just a little bit, which is fine and enjoyable. I'm a bass head, I love bass, but that's me. And the people that watch this want to have something where they're not like, this is too much bass, I want out of here. This has no bass, I want out of here. They want some balance in their lives and qualifiers. There is a little bit much bass on the EJ07. The Claire is done well, and that impacts the mids. The quality of the mids is directly related to the tuning of the bass. Is I guess the way I should have said this from the beginning and saved you 4 or 5 minutes. So the mids are great on the Claire. They're one of the best, actually, and the Shuoer is linked to the bass audibly. You can tell that things that have part of their existence, like vocals in the bass, are actually being influenced by that bass elevation, whereas the Claire doesn't seem to be reproducing that quite in the same way. So I would say that the bass on these is a push. I'd say that the mids on the Clairvoyance is better. I'd say the resolving ability on the Black Sabbath 2 minutes 30-second and beyond is better. I would say that Soundgarden Black Hole Sun, minute 16 timestamp where the bass really comes into its own, and then the whole rest of the playback sounds like a more authentic and enjoyable listen on the Claire than it does on the EJ07. So that's the mids. They sound good on both, but I would take the Claire over the EJ07. Okay, the treble. Using Pink Floyd Money, also Time. I'm listening to On the Run for spatial cue. Somebody was asked, why don't you talk about stage? Psychoacoustic illusion created by manipulation, usually in the treble, mid to late treble. People, that could also depend on insertion depth. So talking about stage is something that I talk about if it's a notable event. Otherwise, I don't. So answer that commenter's question. Foreplay, it's been such a long time. By Boston, it's got a very large virtual stage. Freebird, the live version from One More From the Road, Ronnie Van Zant in the middle, and the cues from the left and the right also give a kind of triangulation and give you a sense of depth and space. In that sense, I think the biggest difference between these two sets would be in the treble. The treble of the EJ07 is fine. It plays back cymbals the way it's supposed to, but because of the way that the bass is, it always seems rather intimate. Whereas the Claire sounds loyal to the master. If it's a live presentation like Freebird, One More From the Road, it sounds like a live presentation. If it's a small, done in studio, Please Do Not Go by the Violent Femmes, that's the way it sounds. Whereas the EJ07 seems to make everything sound more intimate. It is there, the treble is there, the cues that I'm looking for at 39 second, a triangle strike, it's very subtle and it's very gone a lot of times, it's fine. The 27 second cymbal strike by Ginger Baker, which is significant, is there and it's fine, it's not muted. It's better than actually on the FH3 with the FH3 graphs different. It's EST, I don't know. The Claire just seems to match the intended presentation. If you know you're listening to something live and it doesn't sound like that, you can accept it and move along. And I've done that with the EJ07. I've said it and I've read other people talk about it's like being at a club with a great sound system. You're hearing everything, the whole drummer kit, everything's coming in, but it's got overall intimate presentation. The Claire, on the other hand, has a true to master. Like if it's supposed to be a club, it'll sound like that. If it's supposed to be Ronnie Van Zant on stage and they're giving you cues on the left and right, it does sound wider than it does on the EJ07, so it sounds more authentic. Is that a big deal? No, I thought the EJ07 was my favorite tribrid for close to a year. It's excellent. I like it a lot. And there's people that actually bought that set and they got out. Like that's what they wanted and they're gone. Like have a brandy, lay back on the sofa and just tune out until you fall asleep. That's what the EJ07 will do fine. I'm talking about an accuracy to the music that I listen to and how I know it's supposed to be played back. The Clairvoyance would do that better. And it does it so good that it's overshadowing its bigger brother that's more expensive. And they tuned the sub bass to be dominant with not much mid bass for reasons that look great on a graph but don't really pan out when listening to this music. OCD cues, Michael Jackson beep on left side. It seemed like I could catch it on the Claire, not so much the EJ07. The Blister in the Sun finger snaps with very quiet when I must try, nice try. It sounded good on both. The Freebird crowd sounded wider on the Clairvoyance. The Floyd gate announcement between 26 seconds and 58 seconds sounded a little more resolving on the Claire. So people talking about, there's less drivers in the mid-frequency handling. A lot of this woman's talking is going on right there. I've seen it on a graph spectra. I've seen it as it's being played and where it exists, and it's right in there, and she sounds more audible for a longer period of time, all the way to the crossover where they start the other sequence where the stuff is starting to pan from, I believe, your right to your back left. Sounds better on the Claire than it does on the Monarch, and it sounds better than the EJ07. So resolving technicalities and all that stuff, I can't find it. I'm going to give caution to people out there as well. Ask specifics about music and, if possible, music that you listen to. This is a big investment. I think for what you're getting, it's a good investment because there's not a lot out there. There's nothing out there for its price that does what it does. That's $850. That's part of the problem. People didn't know the company. There was no feedback. that's what happened with that. People that have bought it, mostly for the most part, according to my feedback, love it. But $850, $700, that's a lot of coin to drop, especially for a brand that you might not be familiar with. This is a legitimately well-tuned set. It sounds very good. With the library that I listen to, it is really, really good. So good that I had to step back and back away from it because, oh, another Thieaudio comes and he's boosting it up. Shocking. I didn't see this coming. Like, that was automatically going to be muttered, so just leave it alone. But it is very good, and I do think it's better than the Odin, and I do think it's better than all other tribrids, and I think that it's only overshadowed by maybe 2 sets, and one of those is the MEST by Unique Melody, which is absolutely stunning, and it's over there on my left side, and the Sony IER Z1R. The Clairvoyance is a very good set. It would be a wise investment if you were to try to take a chance with this. And if you go with the other one that is sub-bass emphasized, get as much info as you can. Demo it first. Don't put any inline stuff to adjust it. Imagine that you're not going to use EQ. Can you live with that? Because a lot of people say, I can just EQ it, and then they end up selling a set like that a couple months later or moving on from it. I can think of a set that was hyped 2 months ago by other people that nobody's talking about anymore because everybody said, you can put the bass up a couple dB and it'll be fine. Most people can't be bothered with that, really. Just get something that matches them. There's thousands and thousands of earphones. There must be something out there that fits them. Why should I have to dig into an EQ to make it sound like I want it to? Why not just buy something that I open up, stick in my ears, plug it in? That's what I wanted. Because you listened and you got a lot of information via reviews and you made the right choice and you feel smart because you spent the time that should be automatic when investing this amount of money. The Thieaudio Clairvoyance for $700 is an excellent investment. It's something that you could keep for a long time. The quality control on this is as good as it's ever been with this company because lessons learned as every company that grows. So the essentially people that didn't get the best performance prior were like FIO OS beta testers before, and on their backs grows the company. That's the way it goes, even with Apple devices, like all of the stuff that's updated by firmware. You can't update earphones by firmware, and you can't go back and fix stuff. You just take it back. So I think the Clairvoyance is exceptional, and it's a worthy investment of your money, and I do think it's a little bit better than the Shuoer EJ07. I think that's got to do with just overall balance, and I think that the mids and the treble are a little bit more authentic to the master than the EJ07. I'll go ahead and let you guys go, and I am out.